My wife doesn't look at me anymore. Not directly. She looks at me the way you look at something you're not sure is safe. The way you check a dark room, not by stepping inside, but by standing at the door, watching from a distance, waiting to see if anything moves before you commit to entering. She looks at me through mirrors, bathroom mirror, hotel lobby glass, restaurant windows after dark when the outside is black enough to reflect the inside. Any reflective surface we happen to be standing near, her eyes go there first. Not to fix her hair, not out of habit, not absent-mindedly, deliberately, carefully, like she's checking something. I noticed it about 3 weeks after she came home. We were standing at the bathroom sink together, brushing our teeth, doing that completely ordinary married thing that feels like proof that everything is okay, that the hard part is over, that you made it through. And I caught her eyes in the mirror. She wasn't looking at herself. She was looking at my reflection. And specifically, I realized with a cold, slow understanding, she was watching my hands. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that she was still adjusting, that trust takes time, and this was just what time looked like up close. I went back to rinsing my mouth. I told myself it was nothing. And then one night, standing right there at that same sink, I watched my reflection do something my body didn't do. My hand didn't move, but in the mirror, it rose. And in that moment, I understood everything. I understood why Emily hadn't been looking at me. I understood what she had been looking for. And I understood, with a certainty that has not left me since, that she was right to be afraid. My name is Adam, and I need to tell you what my wife saw before I did. What happened to my family didn't make headlines. It never does. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be heard. Subscribe. We tell the stories that don't. I need to take you back. Because the mirror is the end of the story, not the beginning, and the beginning matters. Emily and I met 11 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. I was 28, she was 26. She was standing near a window, holding a drink she wasn't really drinking, looking like someone who had agreed to come and was now quietly reconsidering the decision. I walked over because I recognized that specific expression, the polite social hostage look. I said, I remember this clearly. I said, "You look like you're calculating how early is too early to leave." She laughed, real laugh, not a polite one. And that was it. We talked for the rest of the night. We exchanged numbers. We had a first date the following weekend that lasted 7 hours and ended with us sitting on a pavement outside a closed restaurant, finishing a conversation neither of us wanted to stop. Emily is one of those people who makes you want to be worth knowing. That's the best way I can describe it. She's careful and observant and quietly funny, and being around her made me feel like I wanted to be the version of myself I'd always assumed I could be if the circumstances were right. We were together for 2 years before we got married. Those 2 years were, genuinely, the best of my life. We were easy together. We made sense. We built something that felt solid in a way I hadn't expected love to feel, having come from a family where solid wasn't particularly on the menu. I should stop here and say something honestly. I have a temper. I have always had a temper. My father had one. His father before him. It's the kind of inheritance no one lists in a will, but everyone passes on regardless. I knew it was there. I had managed it, mostly, for most of my life. Small detonations that I always believed were justified in the moment and regretted later. The glass-throwing kind of anger. The door-denting kind. The words you can't take back kind. In the first 2 years with Emily, it barely surfaced. I think part of me was genuinely trying. Part of me understood that what I had with her was worth protecting. And for a long time, that understanding was enough. We got married in October. Small ceremony. Her parents, my mother, a handful of close friends. Emily wore a dress she'd found in a vintage shop and spent 2 months having altered. She looked extraordinary. The first 3 years of our marriage were good. Not perfect, no marriage is, but genuinely good. We had arguments, the way people do, but they were normal arguments. Volume without consequence, frustration that dissolved. And then things started changing, slowly. The way things change when no single moment is clearly the turning point, but the direction becomes unmistakable eventually. My work became more pressured. I started bringing the pressure home. The arguments got louder. The recovery time between them got longer. I started saying things during arguments that I would spend days afterwards trying to walk back, with explanations, with apologies, with the kind of overcompensating warmth that both of us knew wasn't real, but that we both accepted because the alternative was examining what had happened too closely. And then, about 4 years into our marriage, it went further than words. I'm not going to detail it. I don't think that serves either of us. What I'll tell you is that it happened more than once, and that Emily left the third time, and that the morning after she left, I sat in our kitchen and looked at my own hands for a long time and didn't recognize them. Emily agreed to come back on one condition. Not couples therapy, just me. Anger management, she called it, in that specific, careful tone people use around wounded dogs and unexploded minds. Not cruel, not accusing, just exact. The way she speaks when she has thought something through completely before saying it. I said yes, immediately, without hesitation, because in that moment, sitting across from her in the kitchen of her mother's house where she had been staying for 6 weeks, looking at the person I had hurt and the person I still loved, and the fact of how completely those two things existed in the same space, there was nothing I wouldn't have agreed to. I found a therapist, Dr. Keller, mild, patient man with an office that smelled faintly of old books and featured a small succulent on the windowsill that I found myself irrationally worried about over the 12 weeks we worked together. It never seemed to get enough light. 12 sessions. We covered everything you would expect: the inheritance of pattern, the architecture of anger, how it builds, where it stores itself, what it's usually about underneath the specific thing it appears to be about. Breathing exercises that I initially found embarrassing and eventually found genuinely useful. Journaling, which I hated and did anyway. Identifying triggers, mapping the escalation sequence. Learning to read the early signals before the engine reached full temperature. I was a diligent student. That is genuinely true. I took it seriously in a way I hadn't expected to. Part of me, I think, had walked in prepared to perform the process, to go through the motions thoroughly enough that Emily would be satisfied and we could return to our life. But something happened in those sessions that surprised me. Dr. Keller had a way of asking questions that made the answer visible before you'd finished forming it. And some of the answers were uncomfortable to see clearly for the first time. By session 8, I had cried twice. By session 12, Dr. Keller told me I seemed significantly calmer. He used that phrase specifically, significantly calmer. I held on to that. I wrote it in my journal. I repeated it to myself on difficult days. Significantly calmer. I called Emily after the final session, told her I had completed the program, told her what Dr. Keller had said, told her that I understood, really understood, not just as words, what had happened and why, and what it would take to make sure it never happened again. There was a long silence on the phone. Then she said, "I'll come home, Adam, but I need you to know that I'm coming home to try. Not because I'm certain, just because I think you deserve the chance to prove that this is real." I said, "That's all I'm asking for." She moved back in the following Saturday. I had cleaned the apartment, bought flowers. Not performatively, I don't think, but because I wanted her to walk back into a space that felt cared for. I made dinner. We were quiet together in the way you are when you're carrying something that neither of you is ready to put down yet, but you're trying to be normal around it. It was a start. I told myself it was a start. The first weeks after Emily came home were delicate in a way I struggle to describe accurately. Not bad. I want to be clear about that. Not bad at all, actually. But delicate. Like moving around a newly healed bone. You can use it. It works. But you're aware of it in a way you weren't before it broke. And that awareness changes how you move. Emily's still startled if I entered a room too quickly. I learned to make small sounds before turning corners. I learned to announce myself with footsteps on purpose. A slight heaviness in my tread that said, "I'm coming, I'm not a threat, here I am." It became automatic within a week. I didn't think about it consciously. My body just understood what was needed and made the adjustment. She smiled more than I expected. That was the thing that gave me the most genuine hope. Not the big smiles, but the small ones. The ones that appear because something is actually funny or actually warm, not because you're performing okayness for someone. She laughed at the dog on television. She made a dry comment about a neighbor's terrible parking. She stood beside me at the bathroom sink in the evenings while we brushed our teeth, the way married people in detergent commercials do, and it felt like something returning. I remember thinking, about 2 weeks in, that we were going to be all right, that the work had been real, that Dr. Keller had been right. Significantly calmer. New language, new patterns, new version. I remember thinking that. I remember it specifically because of what happened 3 days later. We were in the bathroom. Evening routine. Both of us at the sink. Emily was rinsing. I was finishing up. And she laughed at something. I think it was the face I was making with toothpaste still on my chin. Some objectively stupid-looking reflection in the glass. A real laugh. Light and unguarded. I turned toward her. I was going to say something back, something teasing, something easy, the kind of exchange that costs nothing and means everything. And as I turned, I saw it in the mirror, my reflection's hand. It jerked upward, a fast, sharp half-raise, fingers spread, the specific geometry of an arm going up before a blow. My real hand was at my side, completely still. I had not moved. But my reflection had. I stood frozen, staring at the glass. My reflection looked back at me with my own face, and its hand was already lowering, slowly, like something retreating after being seen. Emily's laugh had already stopped. I looked at her. Her expression had gone somewhere I didn't want to name. "You okay?" I asked. My voice came out steady. I don't know how. "Fine," she said. We finished brushing our teeth in silence. We went to bed. We didn't talk about it, but I lay awake for a very long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a hand that moved without me. I spent years thinking no one would believe this story. Turns out, the right people always find it. If you're one of them, subscribe. There are more stories exactly like mine. I told myself it had been a trick of the light. I told myself I was overtired, that the brain, under enough strain, plays projections on the surfaces nearest to it, that guilt has a way of manufacturing images, that I was not seeing what I thought I had seen. I was seeing what I was afraid of. A visual echo of old behavior, my subconscious staging a warning. That explanation made enough sense that I held onto it. For about a week. The second time happened in an elevator. Emily and I were heading out for dinner. The first proper dinner out since she'd come back. a deliberate step toward normalcy. We were dressed. She looked good. I told her so. She smiled in the way that still made me feel like I'd won something. The elevator doors closed. Mirrored interior, the old kind. We were standing side by side, her hand near mine, but not quite touching. I was thinking about what restaurant we'd chosen. Completely ordinary thought. No anger, no tension, no escalation of any kind. And then, in the mirrored wall, my reflection's jaw tightened. Just that. No hand movement this time. Just the slow, deliberate tightening of the jaw. The specific lock I recognize from the early stages. The pre-language stage, Dr. Keller would have called it. Before the words form. Before the volume rises. The body already preparing. My actual jaw was loose, relaxed. I checked by running my tongue along my teeth. But in the mirror, it was locked. Emily was looking at the floor numbers above the door. She hadn't seen it. Or I thought she hadn't. We got out at the lobby. She walked slightly ahead of me to the door. Slightly further than she would have a week ago. Dinner was fine. Quiet in places it hadn't been quiet before. But fine. After that, I started paying attention in a different way. I started watching my reflection wherever we were together. Every mirror, every window, every dark glass surface that gave back a usable image. I told myself I was monitoring it, that if I could see it, I could understand it. That awareness was a form of control. What I found over the following 2 weeks was this. Sometimes, nothing happened. We'd stand in front of a mirror together, and both reflections would just be reflections. Accurate, still unremarkable. But sometimes, for a fraction of a second, sometimes less, mirror me would move first. Shoulder tightening before any part of me felt tension. Fingers flexing in that specific curled way, like they were remembering a language the rest of me was trying to forget. Eyes narrowing with something behind them that I did not want to identify by name. Always brief, always gone by the time I looked directly at it, like it knew when I was watching. I mentioned it to Dr. Keller at a follow-up session. I was careful about how I framed it. I didn't say, my reflection is moving on its own. I said, I keep seeing what might be micro-expressions in reflective surfaces that don't match how I feel consciously. He nodded in the way he has. The infuriating, unhurried, fully present nod. He asked whether I was afraid of repeating past behaviors. No, I said, too quickly. He wrote something in his notebook, didn't show me what. I went home and stood in the hallway and looked at myself in the console mirror for a long time. My reflection looked back. Completely still, completely normal. Almost cooperative, I thought. Almost like it was behaving because it knew I was alone. Somewhere in the 3rd week, I realized Emily had stopped using mirrors altogether. Not in an obvious way, not dramatically. Emily doesn't do anything dramatically. She is quiet in her self-protection, the same way she is quiet in most things. But once I noticed it, I couldn't not see it. She stopped using the hallway console to fix her lipstick before we went out. She started doing her makeup in the bedroom with a small handheld mirror that she angled carefully, always when I wasn't in the room. She began approaching shop windows at a slight angle, body turned, eyes ahead, navigating around her own reflection rather than through it. Once, at a hotel we stayed at for a weekend, an attempt at something normal, something restorative, something that looked like a couple moving forward, she physically steered me toward the carpeted wall of the lobby, rather than let us walk past the large decorative mirror near the entrance. Her hand on my arm, gentle but certain, a redirection so smooth it almost passed as affection. I stopped walking. "Emily?" She looked at me, not at the mirror, at me, which had become unusual enough that it landed. "You're avoiding mirrors," I said. A pause. "I'm not." "You haven't used the hallway mirror in 2 weeks. You redirected us just now." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can we talk about this later?" "I'd like to talk about it now." She looked away, down the corridor, the careful calculation of someone deciding how much is safe to say. Then she said, "I just find it easier not to." "Easier not to use mirrors?" I said. "Or easier not to look at my reflection?" She didn't answer, which was its own answer. That night in the hotel room, after she had fallen asleep, I lay in the dark and thought about the timeline, about when she had started avoiding them, whether it was before or after I had first noticed the reflection moving. I couldn't be certain, but I thought, with the specific dread of a conclusion you don't want to reach, that it might have been before. That Emily had seen something in those mirrors before I had started looking. That she had been adjusting her world around an observation she hadn't yet decided how to name. She was watching my reflection, I realized, not because she was frightened of what I might do. She was watching it because she had already seen what it showed her. And she was trying to decide whether the man standing in front of her was the same one living inside the glass. I asked her directly, one night about a week after the hotel. We were in the kitchen, the ordinary quiet of an evening, dishes done, television off, the specific peace of a Tuesday that has nothing pressing in it. Emily was reading. I was sitting across from her, not reading the thing I'd intended to read. I said her name. She looked up. "Do you think I'm going to hurt you again?" I asked. The question landed in the room and sat there. Emily set her book down. She took a moment, not a hesitation, more like a preparation. The way she always approaches important sentences. "I think," she said, carefully, "that you want me to trust the version of you that's trying very hard. And I do see that version. I see the work you've done. I see the sessions. I see you counting to 4 when something frustrates you. I see the effort." I waited. "I just don't know," she said. "Which version gets tired first?" I sat with that. Which version gets tired first? The one trying, or the one waiting? "Have you seen it?" I asked. "In the mirrors. Have you seen my reflection move when I haven't?" A long silence, longer than any silence we'd had since she came home. Then she said, "Yes." One word, but it moved through me like cold water. "How long?" I asked. She picked up her book again, not to read, I think just to have something to hold. "Since I came back," she said. "Since the beginning?" She nodded once, small and precise. I looked at my hands on the table, completely still, just hands. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because," she said, "I wasn't sure if what I was seeing was real or if I was just afraid. And I didn't know which of those was worse." We sat in the kitchen for a long time after that, not talking, but not apart either. Just two people in a room with a very large question between them that neither of us had the answer to yet. Before she went to bed, she stopped in the doorway and said, without turning back, "I'm still here, Adam. That means something. I just need it to mean something to you too." I stayed at the kitchen table until past midnight. 3 days after that conversation, I decided to prove something. Not to Emily, to myself. I had been thinking about what she said. Which version gets tired first? And I had spent 3 days, quietly, privately furious at the implication, at the idea that underneath the work, Underneath the 12 sessions and the breathing exercises and the journaling and the laminated self-improvement circus, there was something unresolved, something waiting. I refused to accept it. I had done the work. Dr. Keller had said so. Significantly calmer. I had changed. I was not the person I had been. The mirror was guilt. The mirror was projection. The mirror was my own fear wearing my face, and I was going to stand in front of it with Emily and demonstrate to both of us that there was nothing there. She was at the bathroom sink. Evening routine. The comfortable ritual we had rebuilt slowly over the weeks. The thing that felt like proof everything was okay. I came in quietly, stood behind her. She went still immediately. I felt it, the particular stillness that is not calm, but its opposite, the held breath kind. I wrapped my arms around her waist, gently, deliberately, the embrace of a man demonstrating gentleness. "See?" I said softly. "Nothing." I was looking at her face in the mirror as I said it, looking for the release of tension, the small exhale of someone whose fear has been answered. Her eyes weren't on me. They were below me, slightly to the right, fixed on the mirror with an intensity I had never seen in her before. On my reflection's hands. I looked. My arms were around her waist, both of them, real, physical, present. I could feel the fabric of her shirt. I could feel the warmth of her through it. My hands were clasped loosely in front of her, completely still, completely controlled. But in the mirror, my right hand was rising, slowly, with a terrible, unhurried deliberateness, rising from where it was clasped and moving upward, along her side, toward her shoulder. The specific trajectory of an arm going somewhere it should not go. The movement I had spent 12 sessions learning to identify and interrupt at the source. My real hand was not moving. I stared at it. I watched my reflection's hand continue its slow rise, while my actual hand remained completely, provably still. The disconnect between the two was so absolute, so impossible, that some part of my brain refused to process it as real and simply went quiet. And then Emily started crying. Not loudly. Emily doesn't cry loudly. She cried the way she does everything, quietly, without performance, with a precision that made it worse than any sound she could have made. She was crying before my own eyes had finished understanding what they were seeing. I let go of her, stepped back, looked at my hands, my real hands, hanging at my sides, completely still, completely innocent. And then I looked at my reflection. My reflection looked back. It was lowering its hand, slowly. The way you lower something when you've been caught. I still think about whether I did the right thing. Maybe you do too after watching this. That question, the next story answers it differently than you'd expect. Emily left the bathroom without a word. I stood there, alone, just me and my reflection. I looked at it for a long time. It looked back. Still, now, cooperative, the way it always was when I was alone, when there was no one else in the frame, no one to perform the warning for. And I thought about what Dr. Keller had said, about the pre-language stage, about the body preparing before the conscious mind catches up, about the gap between what we intend and what we carry, about how the work of repair is not the absence of the wound, but the daily, deliberate management of it. I thought about what he had written in his notebook after I said no too quickly. I thought about what Emily said, which version gets tired first. And I understood, standing in front of that mirror, alone, looking at the face of a man who had done 12 sessions and used the breathing exercises, and filled the journals, and believed, genuinely believed, that the work was done. The work is not done. The work is not a destination. It is not a 12-week program with a certificate at the end. It is not a thing you complete and then carry with you as proof of completion. It is daily. It is hourly. It is the 10,000 small moments where something in you wants to go one way and you choose another. The mirror wasn't showing me a supernatural thing. It wasn't haunted glass or some external darkness wearing my face. It was showing me the truth that Emily had always been able to see and that I had been working hard not to. The impulse was still there. The therapy had given me tools. The tools were working. But underneath them, patient and silent and entirely real, the thing I had inherited and had been managing and believed I was close to being finished with, it had never left. It was showing up in mirrors because mirrors don't lie the way minds do. Because a mirror shows what is, not what you've decided to present. And what is a man still in the middle of something he hasn't finished yet. Not at the end of it, not across it, in the middle. Emily knew. She had known since the beginning. She had come home anyway because she believed in the trying. She had been watching mirrors not because she was afraid of me right now, but because she needed to know whether what she was afraid of was still present underneath the trying. The mirror answered her. Every time. Emily is still here. I say that first because it matters most. We talked the next morning, longer and harder than any conversation we've had since she came home. She told me what she had been seeing, not just recently, from the beginning. The small movements, the micro-expressions, the jaw, the hand, the shoulder. She had been cataloging them, she said, not consciously, not as a list, but the way you catalog things your body already knows are important before your brain decides to admit it. She said she had kept coming home to the sink every night because some part of her still believed that one evening the mirror would show her nothing. Just two people brushing their teeth. She said, "I wanted to be wrong, Adam. That's why I kept looking. I have called Dr. Keller. We are not done. We were never done. I understand that now in a way I didn't 3 months ago when I sat in his office for the last time feeling like I had reached the other side of something. There is no other side. There is just the side you're on and the direction you're facing and the choice every day to keep facing the right way. I still look in mirrors, not to check whether my reflection moves. I've stopped trying to catch it or study it or explain it away. I look because I think it's important, for me specifically, to look at myself honestly. Not at the version I want to be. Not at the significantly calmer version with the journal and the breathing exercises and the completed program. At the full version. The complicated, unfinished, still in progress version. The one Emily has always been able to see. Last night we stood at the sink together. Same ritual, same mirror. She looked at my reflection first, the way she always does. Then she looked at me. Direct, real, no glass between us. She didn't say anything. She just held my gaze for a moment, steady and clear and full of everything that a decade of loving someone carries in it. And then she went back to brushing her teeth. I don't know what she saw, but I know she's still looking. And I know that means she hasn't given up yet. Neither have I.